You know, the ACLJ is fighting it out across the country to protect your right to vote for the candidate of your choice in the Republican primary, and then ultimately even the general election. These 14th Amendment cases are having an impact on that. In Minnesota, a case where the ACLJ filed an amicus brief on behalf of ACLJ members and supporters, those of you who signed those petitions in defense of the 14th Amendment and this attempt to remove Donald Trump specifically from the ballot this time. There was a victory. The Supreme Court of Minnesota said, we are not getting involved in who you vote for in the primary, and this case is really not about the general election. Now, there will have to be cases ultimately about the general election, but what we are seeing is courts that even lean to the left say, you know what, not telling political parties who they get to choose in their primary process and who they get to vote for in their primary process and put on the ballot. In Colorado, the judge extended some time for filing until tomorrow, but we do expect an initial ruling out of that, the early stage of that case, sometime very soon. We expected it maybe at the end of this week. It could come early next week. Remember, there have already been victories as well in Oklahoma by the ACLJ, but that's not the only place we filed. We've also filed to intervene for the Republican Party of Virginia. We have filed in Michigan this week an amicus brief representing the Republican parties of 7 states. So these battles do continue, and we still believe ultimately that these cases about Donald Trump and will your vote count if you vote for him, either in the primary or the general election, as now the Minnesota court has said they weren't ready to rule on yet, will that count? Will that vote count? And ultimately, we still believe it's very possible these cases end up consolidated at the U.S. Supreme Court. So we are representing whether it's ACLJ supporters, Republican parties, or committees all across the country at different stages of this case, but we are seeing victories. We already saw them in Oklahoma. We've now seen it in Minnesota. The Minnesota one, what it did was say we're going to say we're not getting involved in a primary, and we don't think it's ripe for a discussion on a general election. I think that's these courts not wanting to get involved in this, but we filed there. But we're making arguments in that case in Colorado as an intervener on behalf of the Colorado Republican Committee. And Deb, we now know our team will be there for closing arguments on November 15th.
I was with Jane Raskin, who headed that team up for us just the other night for working on this stuff, the matters we're working on, but we had a chance to meet with Jane and Marty as well. I had dinner with them, and they're prepared to bring that case to conclusion. I think ultimately that one is headed to the Supreme Court of the United States. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Dad, just to update people, we did those meetings on Capitol Hill. We met with foreign governments as well. What was the next step?
We've got to get before the United Nations on behalf of these hostages. And yesterday afternoon, CeCe Heil in our office worked with some of our team members here, and we are filing for representations with the United Nations, a committee of the United Nations that deals specifically with hostages. Now, do I have a lot of hope that the UN's going to give us a positive result with Hamas? No, but it does put the UN in the vice, and that's the idea here, pressure on the United Nations. At the same time, the number of hostages of the 240 that are held right now, and there's a talk of about 15 to 30 being released in the next, could even be in the next 4 hours. We'll find that out. And there may be some Americans in there. There may be some internationals. There may be some of the young children. We don't know yet. We're working on that. It is conceivable, Jordan, that by this time next week, we will be representing 120 of the 240 hostages, and maybe more than that.
The U.S. has been told by Israelis that there will be no military operations in certain areas in northern Gaza for these 4-hour periods that start today. And I think they're in the phase, Rick, where they inform the public in these areas that this stoppage is coming. Again, so it's a very quick cessation of hostilities, and it does, and we'll see if Hamas abides by that and Palestinian Islamic Jihad abides by that and doesn't fire into Israel. Now, these are kind of the deals that are made, whether it's to get out hostages, but also to help the Gazans that, again, want nothing to do with Hamas and just want to get away from this fighting. I don't see this as really a negative move by Israel, so long as all sides are kind of complying with this. And I would hope that they're getting something out of it, that it's not just a way for Hamas to resupply its gas and oil so that they have the resources they need to keep firing into Israel.
Put me on the side of not trusting anything that Hamas says. Their leaders are billionaires in Qatar,
Yep.
totally comfortably calling the shots. And by the way, it doesn't take a pause to release the hostages. They grabbed hostages. They burned babies in ovens. This is a terrorist group that we should have no mercy on. The idea that we have to stop punishing them for burning babies in stoves because they have hostages and they're saying, oh, let up so that we can have a pause so that we can, I don't know, release. They haven't even committed to releasing the hostages. This is a Western idea that they will release the hostages if we let up. Let's see.
Jordan, we met with the hostage families for the last time this morning before they left, and I'll tell you, it was everybody. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. It's very emotional.
Sure.
Doris, who was on the broadcast yesterday, of course, there was a video that was released apparently last night of her son being shot when he was now we knew he was shot, but they actually have released the video of this now. That is out, and she was quite emotional. We're hoping he's alive. We're hoping I hate to say you hope he's a hostage and he's alive, but that's what you hope at this point. But we're not, there's no stone we're leaving unturned here.
I think for all of our supporters, and when they hear this international work, sometimes they think that's even a more uphill battle than the United States. But if you have the key relationships that we've built over these years internationally, you can get things done sometimes in France and sometimes through these international organizations and institutions that you can't get done through only the United States government. Not that the UN is always the easiest place to work, certainly not for Israel, but that there are good allies within.
These are complicated matters. You're talking about, quadrilateral, multilateral negotiations. We met with the ambassador to Qatar, then we met with former Secretary of State, our colleague at Senior Counsel for the ACLJ, Mike Pompeo, putting together all of that. These are all major moves these are steps you take along the way to get to the goal. The goal, of course, here is that we get these hostages released.
Wow, those families were the face in these meetings that, Logan, we're going to be representing. It looks like about 120 hostage families, which is about half of the hostage families. And we'll continue to add more at international institutions. So the meetings have kind of shifted from what to do with the U.S. to what to do with the UN to what to do with other international organizations as well.
Well, I think we've shown now with the ACLJ and the work, and you can work with a lot of people. You can work on both sides of the aisle, even when situations like this happen. You can actually have responses. The people get stuff done. Our team is there in Washington, D.C. with these families. You saw the Speaker of the House thanking the ACLJ and you and Dad directly by name. This is not something that's going on from a lot of organizations.
Optimistic that if they're alive, and I believe they are because I think they're Hamas's negotiating tool, that this kind of global pressure we're able to put on here is going to be significant.